This phone looks ridiculous. It's short, it's wide, chunky, expensive, blue, and it folds like Huawei took a iPad mini-like tablet and squeezed it into a pocket. But here is why you should actually care. Apple is rumored to be working on its first foldable iPhone. Samsung is rumored to be working on a wider fold. And suddenly, this strange looking Huawei Pura X Max does not look like some random Huawei experiment anymore. It looks like Huawei may have jumped first into the next big foldable trend, the wide foldable. But here is a reality check. The screen is amazing for watching content. The color is stunning. The form factor is genuinely interesting, but I could not get Google Calendar to work at all. Google Pay is not properly available. The keyboard situation is messy, and the cameras, which I was genuinely excited for, are just, well, let's see. So is this actually the future of foldables? Or is this just a beautiful blue warning sign? Because yes, this is Interstellar Blue, and blue is my absolute favorite color. But I'm not letting a pretty color fool me. Well, I'm going to try not to. By the end of this video, you will know if the Huawei Pura X Max is secretly ahead of the curve, or if this wide foldable shape is just too awkward for real life. We're going to talk about the pocket problem, the 5.4-inch outer screen, the massive 7.7-inch inner screen, the cameras, HarmonyOS 6, the Google app situation, the keyboard problem, NFC payments, and whether this thing actually gives us a glimpse of the kind of foldable Apple and Samsung might be moving towards next. Let's get into it. At first, I thought the Pura X Max was just Huawei being, Huawei. But this time, I think there is something bigger happening. For years, foldables have mostly followed one of two paths. You either had the tall book style foldable, like the Galaxy Z Fold, where the outside screen can feel narrow and the inside screen opens into a sort of square tablet, or you had flip phones, which were cute, compact, and brilliant for nostalgia, but not really serious productivity machines. I know there's a trifold as well, but we're just talking about these type of foldables for now. The Pura X Max feels like Huawei is trying to create another lane, a wide foldable. And that matters because the rumors around Apple and Samsung are pointing in a very, very similar direction. Apple's first foldable iPhone is rumored to have a roughly 5.5-inch outer screen and a 7.8-inch inner display. Samsung is also rumored to be working on a wider foldable with a more tablet-like shape. So when you look at this Huawei now, it stops feeling like an odd type of aspect ratio, and it starts feeling like Huawei saying, we're not waiting for Apple or Samsung to tell people this shape makes sense. We're doing it now. That is why this phone is interesting. Not because it's perfect, and we'll get into that. Not because it's easy to recommend, but because it might be early. And early tech, as you've seen in the past, is always messy. The first version of a new idea usually has rough edges. It usually has compromises, and it usually makes you ask, who is this for? But sometimes those weird early devices show us where the whole industry is about to go. This is what I want to find out today. Is the Pura X Max genuinely ahead of the curve? Or is this the kind of idea that only makes sense in a Huawei launch meeting after too much coffee? Before we talk about the shape properly, I need to talk about the color. This is Interstellar Blue. And honestly, it looks absolutely gorgeous. It has a deep, slightly sci-fi look where the back catches the light and shifts just enough to make the phone feel expensive, because it is, without looking tacky. This is not that. This thing walked into a room wearing a blue velvet jacket and pretending it did not want attention. So in case you didn't get from what I just said, I love this color. Now, before we get too excited and start calling this the future, I need to be honest about one thing I was genuinely worried about before it arrived: the width. I love big phones, so I'm used to carrying heavy devices and stretching my hand across massive screens. But this short and wide shape has made me rethink what big phones actually means. Because a phone can be big in a way that's annoying, or it can be big in a way that's useful. The Pura X Max is still a chunky device. You still know it's in your pocket. In tighter jeans, I don't wear tight jeans, you will definitely feel it more than a slim slab phone. But it's nowhere as near as awkward as I expected. In normal trousers or a jacket pocket, it's fine. It doesn't disappear, but it doesn't feel like you're carrying a brick from a building site. And in hand, it's surprisingly comfortable. One-handed use is better than I ever thought before. Two-handed use is even better because the wider keyboard area gives your thumbs more room to move. Typing feels less cramped. Reading feels more relaxed. Scrolling feels different, but not in a bad way. This is the weird thing about this phone. The exact thing I thought would be the problem ended up being one of the reasons. It makes sense. The width looks strange in pictures, I know, but in real life, the short screen and the wide aspect ratio makes it more usable than I expected. This is where I stopped thinking, Huawei, what are you doing? And started thinking, okay, maybe there's actually something here. Let's talk about the outer screen, because this is where the Pura X Max started to win me over. Closed, you get a 5-inch outer display. Now 5.4 inches sounds small, right? But because the screen is short and wide, it doesn't feel small in the way I expected. It feels different. That is the important bit. On a normal big slab phone, the screen is tall, so reaching the top with one hand can be a stretch. On a narrow foldable cover screen, typing can feel cramped because your thumbs are fighting for space. The Pura X Max sits in this weird middle ground. Because it's shorter, reaching the top of the screen is surprisingly easy. I didn't have to do that risky palm shuffle where the phone slowly slides down my hand like it's planning an escape route. So typing on it is actually comfortable. Messages feel normal. Searching feels good. Replying to the email doesn't feel like I'm trying to write a novel on a calculator. This is where the Pura X Max makes its first real argument. A lot of book-style foldables have outer screens that feel, well, too narrow. They're usable, but they feel like a compromise, right? You get used to them, but you're always aware that you're typing on something slightly squeezed. The Pura X Max goes the other way. It says, fine, let's make the outside screen wider, but keep it short enough to actually reach. And weirdly, that works. For notifications, messages, scrolling, quick searches, and even one-handed use, the outer screen is much more practical than I expected. It's not a normal phone experience, but that is kind of the point. It takes a few minutes for your hand to understand what's going on, but once it clicks, it feels surprisingly natural. The Pura X Max does not make a big phone smaller. It makes a big phone easier to handle in a different way, and that is the part I did not expect. Open the phone and suddenly the weirdness starts making sense. The inner display is a 7.7-inch foldable OLED panel, and this is where the Pura X Max feels genuinely different. The wider aspect ratio is so much nicer for watching content. A lot of normal foldables open into a shape that's technically bigger, but not always better for video. You open them up, press play, and half the display is just black bars staring back at you like you made a questionable life choice. The Pura X Max still has black bars, depending on what you watch, obviously. But because the screen is wider, videos feel more natural. YouTube looks great, but can only get up to 1080p on the app. If you want any higher resolution, you need to use Chrome to access YouTube from the browser. Another workaround. Movies feel more comfortable, but limited for apps like Netflix, as even just watching a long video while eating lunch feels better because the phone sits somewhere between a normal phone and a mini tablet. This is the bit where I started thinking, okay Huawei, I see the vision, because for media, this form factor really works. And then comes one of the most frustrating catches with this phone, because even though the hardware is clearly good enough, the Pura X Max only has Widevine L3, not Widevine L1. Let me explain in normal human language. Widevine is basically the digital security system that streaming apps like Netflix, Disney+, Prime Video and others use to decide what video quality your phone is allowed to play. This is what lets phones stream protected content in proper HD or higher quality. Widevine L3 is the lower level. That means streaming apps may limit you to standard definition, so instead of getting crisp HD Netflix on this beautiful wide screen, you end up watching a softer, low quality version. And that is so annoying because this phone has a screen for it. It has the shape for it. The form factor might generally be one of the best things I've used on a foldable for watching content. But because it does not have the right streaming certification support, it cannot always display that content the way the hardware is clearly capable of showing it. That is the frustrating Huawei experience in one sentence. The hardware is saying, I'm ready for cinema night. The software support is saying, best I can do is standard definition. And on a phone this expensive with a screen this good, that is so painful. Reading articles feels excellent on this. Photos look brilliant. Websites have room to breathe, documents feel less cramped, and multitasking is way more comfortable than expected because you can actually run two apps side by side without both of them looking like they're gasping for air. It's a really good small work machine for quick little tasks. Not a laptop replacement, but for quick productivity, it's genuinely useful. And that is what makes this phone annoying to review. The hardware feels like it might be pointing towards the next phase of the foldables. The software reminds you quickly that you're using a China-focused Huawei phone outside of China. HarmonyOS 6.1 itself is smooth. The animations are clean, multitasking feels polished. The phone handles the wide internal display really well, even with easier boards installed. Switching between the outer and inner screen feels intentional. It's not like the software is panicking in the background. The Kirin 930 Pro chip also feels perfectly smooth in normal daily use. The phone does not feel like it's struggling with its own weird shape, and that's important because if the software was clumsy, this entire wide fold idea would collapse immediately. But now we need to talk about the huge catch. Google. This is a China Huawei phone, so you do not get normal Google mobile services out of the box. That means this is not like buying a Samsung, Honor, Pixel, OnePlus, Vivo, you get the idea. With the Pura X Max, you need workarounds. Oh boy, do you need workarounds. For me, I used Gboard to get lots of Google apps working, and to be fair, things like YouTube, Gmail, Google Maps, Chrome, Google Drive can work well enough for basic use, which is fine. But Google Calendar, in fact, any calendar app pointing to Google Calendar, I just couldn't get working. And that is not a tiny problem for me. Calendar is one of those boring apps that you only realize you depend upon when it suddenly disappears from your life. It's like electricity, right? You don't think about it until the light goes off. Suddenly, you're standing there wondering where your appointments are, what meeting you should have had next, and where your wife needs you to be at that particular point. That is a real problem if you want to daily drive this as your main phone. And speaking of daily driving on your main phone, then there is Google Pay, or more accurately, the lack of normal Google Pay, because this phone does not have Google mobile services. You can't just rely on Google Wallet the way you should or could on a standard Android phone. And that makes NFC payments difficult. Now, to be clear, the phone itself does support NFC. The hardware is there, so your options depend on your bank. Some banking apps allow NFC payment directly through their own app for their respective cards. If your bank supports it, you might be okay. But if your whole routine is built around Google Pay or even Curve Pay, then this, being your daily driver, is going to be a problem. And I know some people will say, just carry your cards. Yes, obviously, but that misses the point, right? A primary phone needs to fit into your normal life. It needs to handle the boring, everyday stuff that we never think about smoothly. Paying for lunch, checking your calendar, typing a message, logging into apps, getting notifications. These aren't exciting features, but they're the things that decide whether the phone is actually livable. A phone can have the most beautiful foldable screen in the world, but if you're standing in Tesco or Walmart trying to buy a meal deal and your payment does not work, suddenly the futuristic wide display doesn't feel so magical. And then we get to the keyboard. Now this might sound small, but it's not. I couldn't install Gboard because of the whole Gboard working in a container type installation. Huawei's alternative is Celia keyboard. And honestly, it's not on the same level. The biggest issue for me is the lack of proper autocorrect. And when you're typing quickly on a phone this unusual, autocorrect is not a bonus feature, it's more of a safety net. Without it, you notice every little mistake. I thought I was really good at typing. Thanks, Celia Keyboard. And that's frustrating because the Pura X Max has really good wide typing canvas. The outer screen is wide enough to type comfortably. The inner screen is actually brilliant for longer typing, but the keyboard experience holds it back. The best alternative I found was Yorkey keyboard, and Yorkey is okay. It's usable. It's better than Celia for me, but it still lags behind the tight execution of Gboard. So again, the Pura X Max has this strange split. The hardware is saying, look at all this space. The keyboard is saying, good luck spelling restaurant. Now, let's talk about the cameras, because this is where I was genuinely excited. Before this phone arrived, the rumors made it sound like the Pura X Max was going to have an amazing camera system. And when you looked at the specs, you can understand somewhat why. You get a 50 megapixel main camera with optical image stabilization and variable aperture. You get a 12.5 megapixel ultra wide and a 50 megapixel periscope telephoto camera. On paper, that sounds very Huawei, right? And Huawei has built a serious reputation for mobile photography. But honestly, I'm not blown away. The cameras are okay. They're not bad, don't get me wrong. I don't want to make this sound like this takes terrible photos, because it absolutely does not. In good lighting, you get those nice shots. The colors have that punchy Huawei look. The main camera can pull in really good detail, and the telephoto lens gives you useful reach. But for a phone with this much hype around the camera, I expected more. I wanted that classic Huawei moment where you take a photo, look at the screen and immediately think, how has this done that? I did not get that feeling very often enough. Now, I still like the foldable camera. Trust me, I do. Like using the rear camera with the outer screen as a preview is brilliant. For selfies, vlogging, or quick creator shots, it's genuinely useful because you can frame yourself while using the best available cameras on the phone. Now, that's a real advantage, but I'm looking at this from an overall camera perspective. I'm not walking away thinking this is the best reason to buy the Pura X Max. The reason to buy this phone is the shape. Camera is not bad. It's just not the headline I hoped it would be. Battery life is another area where the phone has to prove itself, because powering a 7-inch inner screen is not a small job. Inside you get a 5300 mAh battery, and for a foldable, that's solid. Huawei also gives you a 66-watt wide charging and 50-watt wireless, which is exactly what I wanted to see on a premium phone. Battery life will obviously depend heavily on how often you use the inner screen. If you mostly use the outer screen for messages and quick tasks, it's very manageable. It will get you through a full day at no problem. But if you keep the phone open all day because you're watching videos when you're supposed to be working, what? Oh, just me then. Anyway, so as I was saying, using the outer screen for watching videos, reading, using maps, editing photos, exporting videos, and multitasking, obviously you're going to drain it faster. That's not a Huawei problem per se. That's just big screen maths, right? Big screen uses more power, tiny screen uses less power. And thank you for attending my advanced mathematics lecture. But seriously, durability is also worth talking about. The outer screen uses a second generation Kunlun glass. The inner screen uses a foldable flexible OLED with UTG, and the phone has IP58 and IP59 protection. Liquid damage is not something you want to test for unless you're feeling financially reckless. But for rain, splashes, accidental spills, and normal life, it's reassuring and more like something you can actually carry around every day, even if daily driving still comes with software headaches. This Crease isn't so bad. I compared it to the Oppo Find N6, and okay, we're spoilt with that completely. It's definitely not better than Oppo Find N6, because with that crease or lack of a crease, we're completely spoiled. But comparing it to the Honor Magic V6, it's basically on par. So it's not a bad crease, in all honesty. You do stop noticing it once you start using the phone, and the crease isn't behind all the other flagships that have released this year. It's just not on par with the N6, but the N6 is just like another level. So is the Huawei Pura X Max the future? I think the honest answer is that the idea might be the future, but this phone is not ready to be everyone's daily driver in the West. The wide foldable shape makes a lot more sense than I expected. The outer screen is usable because it's not painfully narrow. The inner screen is excellent for reading, multitasking, photos, and especially watching content. This wider aspect ratio is generally nicer for media than a lot of traditional foldables. And with Apple rumored to be working on the foldable and Samsung rumored to be exploring a wider foldable too, Huawei may have arrived early to a form factor that the rest of the industry is about to take seriously. But being early comes with its problems. This phone is wide, yes, so wearing those tighter trousers might be an issue for some people. But also, Google Apps needs workarounds. Google Calendar doesn't work at all. Even Google Pay, as I mentioned previously, isn't available. Gboard can't be installed. Celia Keyboard is not good enough for me because of the weak autocorrect. And while Yorkie keyboard is the best alternative I found, it still doesn't match what Gboard is. And the cameras, despite all the rumors and my own excitement, are just okay. Not bad, not embarrassing, and not the amazing camera system I hoped this phone would have. So who is this phone actually for? It is for tech enthusiasts. It's for people who are bored of normal phones. It's for people who want to see where foldables might be heading next and are willing to deal with the software headaches that this comes with. But if you want a reliable primary phone that handles payments, calendar, Google Apps, passwords, banking, keyboard notifications, and daily life without constant little compromises, this is a difficult phone to recommend. This is a strange thing about the Pura X Max. As a piece of hardware, it's one of the most interesting phones I've used. As a daily driver, it asks for a lot of patience. Huawei may not have made the wide foldable everyone should buy today, but they may have shown us the shape Apple and Samsung are about to make normal tomorrow. And because it's Interstellar Blue, I'm slightly annoyed at how much I still want to love it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like and subscribe, and watch out, I have a lot of videos coming your way because I'm nearly at that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Just help me get there. Please feel free to share and forward this if you found this video genuinely useful. I'm Maz, and this is MazTechCentral, where I like to keep tech simple and accessible for everyone. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.